delighted to welcome you all to this evening's Dublin Festival of History talk. Um, it's with The Lost Folk with Lally MacBeth. So the Dublin Festival of History is an annual free event which is brought to you by Dublin City Council, and it's run with Dublin City Libraries in partnership with the Dublin City Council Culture Company. The festival will run until this Sunday, the 12th of October, and we still have lots of events on if you want to check out our website, dublinfestivalofhistory.ie. We're so happy to have Lally MacBeth with us here today. She's an artist, writer, and curator based in Cornwall. Her work takes in history, folklore, performance, ritual, and artifice, and the links between high and low culture. She's the founder of the Folk Archive and co-founder of the Stone Club. Lally's first book, The Lost Folk, was published just June this year by Faber. The Lost Folk is a fresh and engaging celebration of customs, places, objects, and people that make up what we know as folk in Britain. And interviewing Lally today is Matthew Shaw from the Stone Club, and he's going to talk to her about her new book, The Lost Folk. The interview will last about 45 minutes, and then at the end, Lally's happy to take some questions. So if you could type any questions you have into the Q&A, and we'll come to them at the end. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Well, the Lost Folk. Well, if we're going to start talking about the Lost Folk, perhaps we should start with the Folk Archive. I'm not sure how many people that are joining us today will know about what that is, but I think it'd be interesting anyway for you to just talk a
Yes,
little bit
I'm
about
just
your work.
going to very quickly, quite badly, um, put the slideshow on so that everyone can see my slides. Although now there we go. Sorry, I'm very
Ah,
technical as a person, which I think is probably fitting for someone who's interested in folk. So yeah, the Folk Archive, I began it in the very beginnings of 2020. It was sort of pre-lockdown. It was that sort of period where I think maybe there was a slight foreboding feeling because, there was lots of news coming in from Europe, and it felt quite strange. And I'd also had a period of quite ill health for quite a long time, and so I was sort of looking for a project, something new to do. And I'd been making some work in my kind of practice as a visual artist about Morris dancing and folk customs more generally. And I was using lots of archival images, which is something I really like to do. I often kind of go into archives or libraries to look for many photographs, but also films to inspire me or to make work from. And lots of these I wasn't using directly, but I thought, oh, maybe I'd like to use them at another point, or just I wanted to put them somewhere. So I thought, oh, I'll start an Instagram, because that felt like a kind of visually useful place to put them and be able to kind of find links and just explore it. Yeah, visually. So I started sort of doing this in kind of the beginnings of January in 2020 and didn't really think much of it, but was posting quite regularly. And then lockdown happened, obviously, and suddenly we were all reduced to staring at our screens all the time. So I think I was in some ways quite lucky, I think, t with the timing in that people obviously started following because they were probably staring at their phones more. So it quite quickly got quite a big following. I think also there was like a massive resurgence of interest in folk customs and also folklore at that period, the sense that we suddenly couldn't go outside. It felt quite pressing, the idea of being in touch with the seasons. So yeah, it sort of very much started there, and then it kind of spiraled off into loads of different directions. I started a quite strange podcast where I got people to write me poems, and I made kind of strange soundscapes to sit against them, all inspired by kind of things that I was posting. Uh, I started a magazine,
mhm.
uh, and yeah, and it's kind of just grown and grown, and I still to this day try and post regularly. It's not always that regular, but whenever I find something that I think will be interesting, it goes there.
Well, the magazine's probably worth going into a bit more as well, because actually thinking about it, that was a stepping stone into
Sorry.
you actually working with articles in print and with pieces in print that's
Mm,
connected with the folk archive. Um, and so what made that transition happen between a very visual medium, which is Instagram with small captions, and
yeah.
like it's very design, it's very visual,
Mm.
and I think all your work is, even with the Lost Folk, that comes across, but obviously there's a shift there. Um, uh,
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I'm very much a sort of tangible objects person. That I worked in archives for a long time prior to uh,
yeah,
this newfound love of writing. But I've always been really interested in sort of the physical thing and very much like love going in and sort of diving through papers or photographs or costumes. I worked at Central St Martin's Museum and Study Collection for quite a long time, and they had a real emphasis on handling objects because it was a study collection connected with the university. So the thought was that people could learn from these objects. So I'm really passionate about that, and I think starting a magazine felt a sort of way of bringing what was purely in the digital realm at that point into the physical. So for me, it was just kind of having an object felt really meaningful. But also, I was um, sort of prior to starting the folk archive, I had an experience of clearing my grandfather's shed, which is now sort of infamous moment in my family history. So my great aunt was a librarian, and she was also a very passionate collector of objects, as was my grandma. And it was sort of, yeah, there was a kind of whole trail of people in my family who were kind of collecting all sorts of weird things like trolls and
like troll dolls.
troll dolls, yeah, and songs, like just dolls in general, but also sort of teddy bears, costumes, textiles. So it was always kind of surrounded by like quite packed spaces. And then when um, both my grandma and my great aunt died, my grandfather, who was completely the opposite, didn't really care for objects too much. He was very much a kind of out of the house person. He put all of my great aunt's very, very well researched kind of family archive into the shed, just not really thinking about it, I don't think. And then some years later, my mum and aunt and I decided, oh well, we'll go and have a look in the shed and see what's in there, and discovered this like incredible archive of photographs and documents. That she basically kept every single receipt of every single member of the family, but also loads of really amazing pageant photographs from Shropshire
Mm.
where my family are based. So these are of my great aunt Enid, who's in the kind of brown dress, dressed as the merchant's daughter in a pageant that took place in 1934 in Ludlow Castle. And so it sort of, yeah, it set me on a bit of a trail, I suppose, this, because I just got really excited about this. So this is a maypole also in Ludlow, which is also in the shed. And then this is a carnival that took place there as well. And I think somewhere in the distance is another one of my relatives in the kind of pointy Pierrot hat. So yeah, it was kind of like a whole set of things I feel happened that made me start to ponder actually maybe I need to spend some time kind of researching these things and thinking about things that exist in other archives that have maybe been a bit forgotten. I've always been a real lover of the thing that's like shoved in the corner
Mhm.
or sort of not been got out of the box in a while. So yeah, that's definitely where it began.
Mhm. So was this also part of the beginning of the folk archive, do you think, of actually collecting things and preserving things, actually putting them away, storing them, and actually archiving them?
Yeah, I think so because I think that like when I discovered all the stuff in the shed, obviously it was very pressing to get it out of there quite
Mm.
quickly because it was very damp. There were sort of quite clearly rats living in there. And a lot of the photographs were getting quite badly damaged. So we sort of had this quite mad 3 days, like getting everything out onto the lawn and sorting it into piles of things that were completely irretrievable and things that were vaguely damaged and then things that were okay. So I think, yeah, it did make me think about the act of sort of collecting and archiving in a more sort of concerted way, I suppose. And I mean, I've always collected kind of textiles. For a long time, I sold vintage, and so I've always been really interested in that. But I hadn't necessarily ever collected photographs. So I'd sort of more gone off and found them. But I did start at this point, kind of amassing more of a collection of my own.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well, that's interesting because I was wondering about your research methodology, about the way in which you go about finding things, how you find things. I mean, you found a whole bunch of things that come from your own family archive there in the shed, but you seem to have this sort of magpie's eye for interesting folk things from all over the world as well. So, yeah, I wondered if you could talk a bit about your methodology, but also we're using the word folk a lot, but like
yeah.
how you categorize folk and what folk actually means from your perspective.
Yes, no, both really helpful things. Um, yeah, so my own methodology is definitely quite organic. Someone described it to me that it was like a charity shop, my methodology. In there's like really organic, and I of I'll quite often go off on tangents. Definitely within the writing of the book, I was doing that a lot. I'd sort of discover something and then it would take me down like a kind of strange rabbit warren and I'd end up somewhere completely other. But I really love that and I think like folk is amazing for that because it's naturally very kind of movable
Mm.
and just changeable and sort of constantly evolving. So for me, that was the only way or the only way that you can sort of deal with it as a subject. You've got to allow it to be sort of yeah organic. But I was aware that in writing the book I had to sort of have some definitions, I guess,
Hmm.
because obviously a lot of people will be coming to the subject for the first time, and also just like it's quite helpful, I guess, just to even lay them down for myself. I found it useful to think, okay, what are the things that actually define it for me? So I came up with a series of questions that you could ask yourself if you were encountering a folk object or custom for the first time. So the first one is, has it been touched or made by the human hand? The second is it being made or performed with a particular locality in mind? And the third is it for and of the people? And I think that one for me is that that's the one I sort of come back to the most. The other two are definitely important, but I do contradict myself sometimes because there are sort of mass-produced objects
Hmm.
that I write about as well, like things like souvenir tea towels and pamphlets and
Mm.
badges. So there, it even within this, it's tricky because it is sometimes like, oh no, actually, that's not letting that thing come in. But I think it helps me definitely focus in
Mm.
thinking these things. Um, and definitely is it for and of the people is one I return to time and time again. Is because I think it's just, yeah, it's particularly useful when thinking about customs, actually, I think.
Maybe that's the immutable one, and the others, maybe there's a bit of leeway, just like with folk, things
Yeah,
change and evolve as time goes on, perhaps.
I think so. Well, also, I think it's quite different for everybody. And I really don't want to ever feel like I'm dictating to anyone, how folks should be for them, because it is, it's absolutely like individual for each person and each community. And so, um, you know, these things might apply for me, but they might not apply for everyone else. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Well, and documenting that change and allowing for folks to change rather than clinging
Mm.
onto it very tightly in a very rigid way feels like a very positive thing.
Mm.
As you say, if it's for and of the people, then the people themselves are going to interpret things ever so slightly differently over time.
That's true. And actually, what's been really nice is that people have interpreted this from the book. So I now have someone who I think it's like not that far into the book, but I wrote a very short line about postbox covers, knitted postbox covers being potentially a form of new folk art. And so I'm just going to skip forward a bit. Someone started sending me pictures of postbox covers, and
Yeah.
they email them to me, and they actually, I think they were emailing me so many that they felt a bit bad. And then said, I hope you like these, and you're not annoyed that they're clogging up your inbox." And I was like, no, it's great. This is exactly what I want people to do. Is I want them to take the book and I want them to use it as a tool to kind of go out there and find their own examples and save their own collections and their own objects or their own customs. So I was really delighted by it. This was one of my favourites, but there's also an amazing one I discovered a little while ago here in Cornwall of Lanyon Coit, a burial chamber right down in West Penwith, and someone's knitted it in like amazing 3D on top of this postbox in a tiny little village. It's really brilliant. But the other thing is that so I write a lot about pub signs and also church kneelers, which is another great passion of mine. And I think, both those things are things where they're not necessarily items that people have ever considered within folk art or folk as a term. And I think it's sort of just trying to push the boundaries of what that could mean. Church kneelers are a really interesting one to me because I think they so often have really brilliant examples of kind of customs. So here we've got two really good ones that illustrate this of the Clipping Sunday service, which happens in Painswick. Matthew knows this well because I've dragged you to it.
Mm.
And it's an amazing custom that still happens today. It happens at the end of September, I think on the last Sunday or the second to last Sunday. And the children of the village, it's now children and adults, but it was originally children, join hands around the church and clip the church, which clip is an Anglo-Saxon term for like a hug or an embrace. So it's the idea of just kind of giving thanks to the church. And then afterwards, they all get given a little bun for their embrace. And it's really sweet, and they sing a hymn, and the church has probably about 40 different kneelers, and like over half of them seem to be talking about the church or the clipping service in some way. Uh, and then the other one is some Morris dancers in Wimborne. So the Wimborne Folk Festival happens there, and I just really liked it because it's kind of sort of sweet. And the other one is in St. Buryan. But I love all of them because I mean, I have like hundreds and hundreds of photos of them now. And they just often have like these amazing kind of examples of folk customs or traditions or kind of societies or clubs or things that you just wouldn't know about if you weren't from that place. So they're really like naturally brilliant ways of storytelling and sort of illustrating the particularities of a village or a town. So yeah, I love them, and I have I started again another Instagram page which is solely dedicated to church kneelers called the Church Kneeler Archive, where I sort of every now and then I'll have a burst of activity and post loads of new ones. And yeah, it's a nice record, I think, of them.
I mean, there's different types of kneelers as well. I've learned from going around various places with you, and sometimes we'll go into a church and I think they look really amazing because they'll all be stood up on the pews and really nicely displayed, but they're often from patterns or kits
Mm.
that people make. But here you've got something. I mean, how do they even go about making these things? I've never really thought about it too much before. Would they create a pattern and then, or are they doing this like free form? Like, how do you do it?
Well, I think yeah, generally you would draw the design and then stitch into it. And
Yeah.
there were kind of there are a few different sort of stitches that they would use. Um, but I think yeah, it's interesting. So there's a company in Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire who produce kind of ready-made patterns that you can send off for, pay however much, and they'll send you the whole kit, including the stuffing and
Hmm.
the all of the threads to do it, which is great. And obviously takes like a lot of time, many hours to produce those. But I really love the ones where people have just designed them and sort of drawn up their own vision of what they're going to put on that kneeler. and then yeah, get to work because those are the ones that are really unique to a place. They're
Yeah.
the ones like the Clipping Sunday or the Morris Dancers. And they're the ones where I think, they can record things that have got lost. There's a great one in Dorset of the May custom that happens in Abbotsbury, where it used to happen sort of, I think it's towards the end of May, isn't it? I can't actually remember the exact date. I asked Matthew because he used to live in Dorset, so he's got infinite more knowledge about that. But it records the Garland Day, and that doesn't happen anymore. So it's kind of a lovely record of a custom that has faded within living memory. And there's a Neela to remember it by, but the actual custom does happen because there are not
Mm.
enough children anymore in the village.
Yeah, yeah.
So they can be useful records in that regard. But they're also something that's quite maligned. Like they quite often will be in sort of piles, a bit moth-eaten and sort of mopping up the damp of a church wall. So I think, that was largely my reason for wanting to record them, was that I felt, they weren't really getting the praise that they needed to.
Mm. And you mentioned pub signs earlier, or we
Yes.
saw the beginning of one there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That's a ship's
That's the ship's
figurehead.
figurehead. Yes, that's in Polperro in Cornwall. And there are actually, yeah, there are loads of examples of ships' figureheads being used as pub signs. But I mean, also just loads of really fascinating things that I discovered, living signs, which are not something I knew very much about prior to writing The Lost Folk, but a kind of trend in pub signs, I guess, of times past, for having beehives, actual beehives, as your pub sign. And there's one left in Lincolnshire, um, and it's really amazing. It's just this incredible beehive outside the pub, and the pub is called the Beehive. But things like bells and really like quite intricate kind of ironwork lines. So I think, yeah, again, there's something I'm quite sort of passionate about, because I think what you're definitely starting to see quite a lot more of is, in the gentrification of pubs, the kind of removal of these like unique signs and kind of replacing them with,
Mm.
sort of digitally printed images, which is fine. But it's such an art form,
Mm.
the painted sign, and yeah, I think they're really just fascinating. I love a good pub sign, so I'm very keen to always point people to look at them, and
Mm.
generally to look up, actually. That's something I'm always sort of advocating people to do, because I think we don't do it enough. There's a lot of amazing things that you can see if you look above.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, or look down,
Yes,
because I was then thinking of another phenomenon that you classify as folk art in the Lost Folk, which is model villages.
yes, I know. Well, yeah, that is interesting. So the model village, again, I think it does sort of fall into a similar category. I'm just gonna, yeah, there we
Oh
are.
wow, there we go. Where's
Um, Well, that's actually an interesting one, because that I don't know. I found, and actually, if anyone does know, I would love to, or has any guesses, I would love to know. I found this photograph at a market in Stroud, and
Oh, was this on the outdoor market in Stroud?
yes, yeah, it's a great photo. But yeah, no, and at the point I found it, I was kind of starting to get interested in model villages and thinking about them as kind of folk worlds, and pondering how I could include them in the book. And I think what I came to the conclusion with them is that they're folk in several ways, in that they quite often, this is a good example, show kind of interesting or kind of unusual crafts. So things like they'll have thatched roofs, or this one has an amazing tiled roof, or they'll kind of show lost crafts, or in the example of some of the ones in Dorset, like Corfe Castle and Wimborne, they'll have things that are like, they've got like a poultier as one of the shops, or kind of, a wheelwright, and things that maybe have just fallen out of fashion as kind of things that you could do.
Hmm.
And so they kind of, yeah, I think they're quite interesting in that way. But then they also are these kind of obviously incredible imaginary, tiny places. So they sort of play with myth and legend quite often and scale um, in a really fun and quite folk way. And they're also often really homemade, people are
Mm.
just using what they have to hand, which I really like and admire. I think there should be more miniature miniature explorations. Um, but yeah, I think it kind of I realized like it wasn't really something that people were writing about, particularly in relation to folk. So I do still get sometimes some raised eyebrows about it, but am a big advocate for them.
Mm. And like with church leaders, there's all different kinds, isn't there? You mentioned it a little bit, but some of these are to scale replicas of a moment in time for a town or a village, and then others are sort of an amalgam of different places.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think yeah, they definitely fall into like sort of different categories. I mean, there are some where it will just be an exact replica of the village. So Wimborne Model Town is a good example of that. It's basically the town as it was in 1950,
Hmm.
with a few add-ons, but mostly it's exactly as it was. And then there are others. So there's a model village at Snows Hill Manor in Gloucestershire, which was made by the architect Charles Paget Wade, and that is completely mythic. He basically wanted to kind of create his own world, I guess. And he based it on a kind of the idea of a Cornish fishing village. But I mean, it's about as far removed from that as possible. I mean, it's very sweet, and there's an amazing article that John Betjeman wrote in the 1930s for Architectural Review, where he basically reviews the village and writes about it, but he writes about it as if it's just a full-size village, and it isn't only in the last sentence that he reveals that it's
Mm.
actually
Oh yeah.
tiny, and that you can't actually go to the pub. But what was interesting about that was that Charles Paget Wade he went one further in that he named all of the people in the shops, and he created stories about them. So it was kind of he was basically building a whole world,
Yeah.
which yeah is quite I think quite appealing actually
Mm.
in these times.
I love this photograph as well. I
Mm.
just realized that one of the ladies, as well as a handbag, is possibly binoculars,
Oh yes.
which I kind of like the idea of someone taking
Yeah.
binoculars
I know, just
to a
to
model
fly
village.
into the well, actually, that is well, it's not a bad thought because some of them do have, if you peer into the windows, like these kind of amazing scenes happening. So it's not just the buildings, it's kind of,
Mm.
you have to crouch and bend and get involved with the model village to truly find all of its delights. Yeah.
Yeah, so given all this and all of these different interests, you're finding things that perhaps haven't been considered folk in the past, and you're making a strong argument for why you think they are folk. But so how did this all come together to actually create the book that we have now?
Mm. Well, here is the
Ah,
book.
yes.
Oh. Um, yeah, I mean, when I was kind of first posting on the folk archive, I don't think I really thought that it would become a book necessarily. Like it absolutely wasn't my objective.
Mm.
And I was kind of just thinking, oh, this is all interesting. But I did, somewhere along the line, I thought actually what would be really nice is to spend a bit more time researching some of these ideas and some of these things and some of these people that I'm posting about because you only get so many words and there's only so much that someone will concentrate on the internet. So I did become apparent to me that it would be really great to be able to do this, and so I was very happy when Faber gave me the opportunity to, and it was quite tricky to think, how will I make this work for folk because as I've already spoken about, kind of like organic nature of it means that it is something where, you'll start somewhere and then you'll want to be pulled in the other
Mm.
direction. So I went about it by kind of splitting it into loose chapters that I felt kind of worked for the themes that I wanted to look at. So I really wanted to explore the history of folk a bit and sort of who came before as folk collectors, and I guess also write back in some of the people, particularly women, who'd been left out of folk collection, because it's something I'm really passionate about, particularly having worked in archives, that you become aware quite quickly that there are
Mm.
people's voices who um, yeah, just don't, they don't rise to the top in the same way as others. So yeah, the first chapter is kind of about that. It's called The Lost People, and it really explores that and goes into into those some of those forgotten voices, but also some of those forgotten methods of collecting as well.
Yeah.
Um, so I talk a bit about kind of oral histories and things like that, and being very important to folk collection. And then I go off on and look at lost objects and lost collections, and then lost customs, and finally lost worlds, which is where I talk about model villages and shell grottos. So it was, it's quite a feat because there was a lot to pack in. And to be honest, I probably could have written about four more books because there's so much that did make it in, which I would have loved to write about. And there were also, I was really aware and still am that because I'm based in Cornwall, there's a lot of things about Cornwall in there, but I I sort of did my best to travel around as much as I could, but it is a very rich landscape, which is an amazing thing. But yeah, you could probably write like hundreds of books
Yeah. Yeah.
on each place alone,
Yeah.
which is exciting because I always think, oh, it's nice to, there are so many other projects I'd love to work on and so many other books I'd love to kind of explore with it. So yeah,
And
definitely
how,
just the start.
yeah, exactly. Well, it could go in so many different directions.
Yeah.
How easy was it, or difficult to break the book down in that way? Like, how did it come very naturally to you to choose those categorizations of chapters?
I think it did feel quite natural because I knew, like, obviously, with the subject, we talked a bit about this already, but some people will be coming to folk as an idea for the first time. And so I knew I had to like unpack what that meant and talk also about why, like why would people want to collect? Because I'm also aware that's not for everybody a natural impulse, even if it is for me. And so that felt really important. And then I think, because I'm with the Lost Collections chapter, that was a sort of one where it felt like sometimes like I'm not sure, like it could have been a different sort of chapter. But I think I just love museums, and so I really wanted to talk about some of those kind of quirkier and stranger lost museums, and explore those. So yeah, there's some strange and brilliant things in
Yeah.
there. But that was that was one of my favorite chapters to write. So yeah, it did happen quite naturally, really. It sort of came together quite quickly once I kind of got into my stride with it. It's like, okay, sort of all sorts together. And I think also because I do approach it quite organically, it helps in a way because there's less stress.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not terribly prescriptive about how I go about it. I'll just kind of start and then see where I end up.
Well, sticking with favorite things then, perhaps for a
Yes.
minute, characters, because there are all kinds of amazing
Mm,
characters that you touch on in the book and go into quite some detail with others. I wondered who your personal favorite is.
yes. Well, that's a good question. So, one of my favorite people I write about is Elsie Matley Moore, who she's a figure I've known about for a really, really long time because so my grandma lived in Worcester, in the Midlands, and Elsie also lived there, and she for a long time lived in a house which is now owned by the National Trust called Greyfriars, which she restored with her brother Matley Moore, which is the best name. And she was an incredible woman, Elsie, and I so although I kind of heard her name a lot as a child, because my grandma sort of used to go to tea parties. She had these like infamous tea parties at Christmas, and she was a really passionate needle worker, and so was my grandma. So they sort of used to chat about this, I think. I didn't really know much about her history. And after my grandma died, I kind of went back to Worcester and went to Greyfriars and was like, gosh, this place is amazing. Because it's filled with really strange folk art renditions of what Elsie thought Tudor Britain looked like.
Yeah.
Like lots of very amazing kind of painted cabinets that she made, and like needlework covers on all of the beds, Jacobean embroidery, and yeah, all sorts of wonderful things. So I sort of I started Googling as you do, not really knowing what I would pull up, and I found an article from the Worcester Evening News from like 2010. And this was probably like this would have been about 5 years ago now that I did this. And it said in the article, I have a box of things that belong to Elsie Matley Moore, um, and I'm looking to sell it or, like find a home for it. Um, and so I emailed them, not really thinking, because I was like, gosh, like at this point, probably 15 years or something. No,
Yeah.
10, I can't remember. Anyway, it was enough time to not really know whether that person would still have that box or even if that person was still alive or, interested in talking about it. But she emailed straight back within the hour and was like, yep, I still have the box. So we came to an arrangement and she sent the box and it was filled with just the most incredible archive of photos and drawings by Elsie, all sorts of wonderful things. And from that, I discovered that she had basically spent the entirety of the Second World War recording the stained glass of the Midlands, so Worcestershire, Gloucestershire, right up into Shropshire, actually, in these beautiful watercolours that you can see on the screen here. And this is her also restoring a mural at the Commandery in Worcester. And so she had this incredible life of kind of restoration, but also as an illustrator. And lots of her illustrations are now in the Historic England archive, but also in the V&A. So she's there, but she's very hidden. And
Mm.
there was almost no information about her really. So I kind of, set off on a bit of a trail to discover more. So I wrote a lot about her in the end because I just really wanted to tell her story because she there were lots of things that kind of were thrown up during the course of researching her that were really interesting, including that she had written to Sir Walter Godfrey, who was at that point head of the oh my gosh, I've forgotten the name of it, the organisation. Anyway, he was a very important figure in the kind of restoring Britain after the war, and she basically wanted to go out and record all of these things, but she didn't really have the money to do it. And she sort of wrote to him saying, like, can I have a bit of petrol money? Essentially, she wasn't asking for a lot. And he wrote back saying, oh, well, that's lovely that you're doing that, but, it's very expensive to send you out to and do watercolors, and we've got photography now, so no. But she continued to do it anyway. So hats off to her for being, stoic and just getting on with it, even
Hmm.
without money. Which, is quite impressive, really.
Mm. Well, I'm sure there's lots of objects in that box alone, but I'm wondering what your favorite object is from the Lost
Ah,
Folk.
yeah, okay.
Ah,
Yes, so you'll know Amy very well. In
yeah.
fact, I think she might be
Yeah,
behind
shall I
it.
go and find her?
Yeah, yeah. We might actually have this is good, actual show and tell. So Amy, the ship's figurehead, she's a ship's figurehead in Falmouth down at a little slipway called Upton Slip, in the centre of the town. And she's had a hard life. She kind of washed up there in the 50s and was bought by Bosun's Locker. We have two, who are a local chandlery, and they cared for her quite well in the kind of uh, most of her history, but I guess in the last 20 years or so, she's had quite a few incidents. So you can see in the photos, she'd had her neck slashed when I took this. And she's had a lot of, I guess, like drunk men and just bad behavior from people in the streets weeing on her and all sorts of bad things that we should not talk about here. But she's not fared well. But I really love her because she's just like she is an amazing example of kind of folk art in the street. And she used to have above her, there's like you can sort of see it, there's like a post that juts out above her head, and that there was another figurehead that lay kind of horizontal across that. And I don't know what happened to that. I haven't been able to find out. But I've seen photographs of her with it in the photo. And then the souvenir, Amy, is something I discovered in a junk shop in a village near me, and I didn't know that they had made these. I then discovered another one in a charity shop, and I just think they're really wonderful objects. Like what a great souvenir. Um, so yeah, I mainly love her because I feel like she needs love. Um, and also because I mean, she's like, there's an amazing display of ship's figureheads in the Box, which is a great museum in Plymouth, just over the border from Cornwall, and they have this incredible selection of figureheads. And I mean, they're as good as Amy, and then you sort of go and see her down the street, and it's kind of in one way amazing that you can still visit her in the flesh and sort of touch her hair and give her a little pat on the back. But it's also quite sad because obviously, it speaks of the fact that, are we really respecting these objects? And it's a sort of a bit hazy who looks after her now. So yeah, I'm always sort of trying to advocate for her being looked after. And actually, I have to say, since I think I posted this on the Folk Archive a couple of years ago, and she has been restored since.
Yeah.
So hopefully, it had some effect.
Well, I think we've only got about 5 minutes, so maybe we'll
We could
do.
we could
Well,
skip.
no,
I
don't
could sh
skip. Don't
I
skip
chat
any.
too much.
No, no. I think maybe you could just talk through.
I could chat through this very quickly.
Yeah.
So this is in the Lost Collections section of the book, and it's basically the most incredible topiary garden that existed in Abergwili in Wales, made by a chap called oh my gosh, no, David Davis, I think his name is. Anyway, he honestly, his vision was spectacular. This is only one part of the garden. I mean, there were many, many other scenes. They were all sort of biblical scenes. And he started it when he retired. He'd been all number of things, like a chicken keeper, a beekeeper. He was a bard of the Welsh Eisteddfod. He
Mm.
was, like really talented poet as well. And I just love it. And it's not there anymore. You can't visit it anymore. They're completely overgrown, I think, the garden. He died in like the late 40s. But in its time, it was a real tourist attraction. Like people came from all over the world. I found an article in the Picture Post magazine of all of these American tourists like piling off a bus to come and see the Garden of Eden. So yeah, that's very
The
quick.
angel looks a bit like a stone angel from Doctor Who, and
Because it's quite spooky, isn't it?
I like Eve's dress.
Yeah, it's very good. I know. And I like the serpent always because you can only just see it here.
I guess she's holding the apple as well. I thought maybe she was making a fist for the snake, but
No, it's the apple.
it's the apple. Great. Okay. What are we not? Favorite
Favorite
customs.
customs,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is the WAD, who are a Morris group who I dance with in Cornwall. They're an all-female Morris group. And yeah, I just really wanted to talk about a little bit about how important it is to me to kind of immerse yourself in folk. So I'm always really aware, like, although I've been writing about it and sort of researching it, I've always also engaged in it. So Morris danced. I've been the fool for my Morris side for quite a while now. But I've also been the mock mare, which is an amazing custom that happens very near me in Cornwall, in Penryn. And it's a great inversion custom. So it's basically someone from the community takes the role of mayor for the day. They're elected by a body of people, and then they get to process about the town in their litter with their two attendants wearing cabbage leaves. And you even get like a special amazing copper acorn that they've had made by Coppersmith and Newlyn. Uh, and it's a fun custom, but it also has quite a serious side in that. So you get to make proclamations. So mine was that I wanted free chips, which did happen. But also I wanted free education for all because Penryn was the seat of Glasney College, which was a secular college in the um, medieval period, and it was sort of like a pretty utopian place in that it wrote all of these incredible mystery plays, which are now one of the ways in which like Cornish has
Yeah.
been kind of reintroduced. So yes, that didn't actually happen, sadly. I didn't get that proclamation
Did you get the
through.
chips?
I got the chips, but
Yeah.
not the free education. But anyway, I think they like more seriously are quite a good way of kind of having radical discussions in a community. In Penryn, they lock the actual mayor up. Historically, they did this in the town jail, and now they still wear jailer's robes for the day. And so there's this kind of this idea of like the common person or
Mm.
taking the reins and ruling for one day only. I did actually take it a bit further. I did it for the whole year, and they didn't like that too much. They got a bit funny about it. I went around cutting ribbons for various art spaces that were opening in the town, and the mayor suddenly started appearing at them. So
Be interesting what that would look like at a national level or another level.
absolutely, no, I
What would
think
we
so.
do? What would we do if we could?
I mean,
Maybe leave that for the Q&A.
yeah, don't tempt me. Um,
What else have we got, Lally?
oh,
Oh, look at
okay.
that.
So this is one of my favorite places from the Lost Worlds chapter, and this is an incredible shell garden that was it's in Southampton. It's basically on the outskirts of Southampton. I made Matthew walk there a very long way actually. It was sort of 4 miles, never ending to find this. But it's quite a sad one because it's really disintegrating. It's not very well looked after. The housing I think is a student house now, and it's fine, fine. But I don't think that don't think they really care too much for the fairies that once inhabited this little fairy grotto. But it's really like well respected in the town. Like people like love it, and there are all these amazing Facebook forums of people talking about how magical they used to find it when they walk past. And there are lots of I don't know if you can see it in this photo, but inside them are kind of these shards of mirror. So I think the original maker assumed that you'd like put candles in and
Yeah.
light it and
Well,
it
that's
would kind of glow. So yeah. And then yes, so we're gonna end quickly on meaderies, which are a curiously Cornish affair. And again, something which I really wanted to kind of highlight because they're a real dying thing in Cornwall. Lots of them are closing. Essentially, they're restaurants that sell mead, but they are so much more than this. They often have kind of incredible handmade banners and murals, often with either like a smuggling theme or a sort of vaguely medieval theme. I say very vague because it's yeah, the take on history is loose.
yeah.
But this is a mural that is still present outside the Penzance Meadery, which is now a Premier Inn. But they have somehow, I don't know, I never quite understand this, but they've kept the mural, but it's kind of gradually disintegrating, so they're losing their faces. And then this is a picture from the carnival in Hale, where the Excalibur's Meadery, which was run by a chap called Terry English, he was an armourer for Hollywood films, and he used to do a very spectacular carnival float each year to kind of celebrate and highlight the meadery. And so these are all of the armory suits that he made for the carnival that year. I think he won like every single year because I mean how
Yeah,
could
yeah.
you beat that really?
I love that scene as well, with the houses you can see in the
Yeah,
background of
it's
Hale
great,
and
isn't
the
it?
lorry
Yeah,
and then the knights. It's fantastic, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Have you posted that one before?
I haven't ever posted that one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe
Mm.
you could. Um, right, so would you like to do a quick reading?
Yeah,
Perhaps we'll end with that.
fine. Yeah, I could do a quick reading and then we could go
And then
backwards.
go
Yeah.
for any questions that we might have.
Yeah, I always like to end with this reading just because it really sums up what I'm trying to do and hopefully brings some hope for everybody. I have frequently been asked during the current revival in folk whether I think the enthusiasm of people for folk will wane. Will people not grow tired and move on to the next thing? My answer is always that people will only grow tired of folk when they grow tired of being alive. Customs, traditions, and all the bits in between are part of being human. The ways in which they are made manifest can be different. Sometimes it's through a shell garden, other times it's in a parade through the streets, and often it's in the annual fair day that takes over a town. At the centre of it all, though, is a desire to make a mark and be heard, a chance to sing, to dance and to make merry, to celebrate a wassail or make a mosaic or learn a clog dance or see in the May is to be alive. It is a point of connection to our ancestors, but it is also a chance to connect to the future and to be hopeful about that future. Celebrating the coming of spring or the ebbing of winter is a way in which we can say, it's okay, another season will come, and another, and another. And what is more hopeful than that? Folk allows us to put colour into the grey days and makes us feel that brighter moments are coming. As long as we inhabit the earth, humanity will find some sort of way of marking our days, our seasons and our holidays, because it is the way in which we mark time, the way in which we collect together, and the way in which we express ourselves. In unsettled times, this becomes more essential than ever. Hence, rather than people's interest waning, I think it will increase, because to be interested in and engaged in a folk practice is to find belonging. And this is paramount in a world where we face a changing climate, ecological unrest, and many of us experience political division and economic deprivation. In an unsettled world, to engage in folk customs is a radical act. It is a message that we have not given up, that we will continue to dream, and that we believe there is something better ahead, something worthy of celebration. To continue to don a costume, to dance, to plait a corn dolly, and to collect together is to believe that the world is alive. It is a recognition that through coming together, we are a force for change. We are the folk and we will not be lost, because wherever there are people, there is community, and wherever there is community, there is folk. Thank you.